thinner the tahini will get. So you'll see that while I'm whisking this together, that it's getting so thick that it's even kind of in one big clump on my whisk. So we're just simply going to add in a little bit of more water at a time until this starts to thin out. The reason why you want to add a little bit of water at a time is because depending on the tahini that you have, it might take more water or less water than the tahini that we use for our recipe development. Also because depending on where the tahini is in the jar and how old it is, the tahini truly might be a little bit thicker at the bottom or thinner at the top. So the reality is that tahini is kind of a very, wouldn't say sensitive, but special ingredient in that it's different almost every time. In Israel, you'll see that they never really measure, right, when they're making a tahina sauce for their hummus in their stores. But of course, for the cookbook, we tried our best to create the perfect ratio. So I'm just adding in that last quarter cup. You'll have seen that the tahini sauce is still kind of thick, even stuck on my whisk a little bit. But the more that we mix it together, you'll see it's going to loosen up and create a really beautiful sauce, almost thick like ranch, definitely very pourable, and a beautiful orange color and creamy consistency. So I'll just scrape off all the thick stuff and give it a good whisk. This yields about 2 cups of the turmeric tahini sauce. We're actually going to use pretty much all of this in the recipe for today. There you go. You can see that the tahini sauce has really loosened up. My whisk is going through it very quickly, and it's very pourable and spreadable, and a nice thick sauce consistency there.
We have a couple of
pale orange color. Yes, any questions?
Yeah, somebody has asked if it's, do you have to refrigerate the tahini once the jar is opened?
You do not have to refrigerate the tahini once the jar is open. It's water that will turn tahini rancid, not air. And so if you prefer your tahini a more pourable consistency, like I do, I keep it in the pantry, similar to peanut butter or almond butter. If you prefer your tahini a little thicker, and also keeping it cold helps suspend the oil. It keeps it from separating as much. You can always keep the tahini in the fridge if that's your preference. But truly, tahini is shelf stable even once open. But once you mix it with water, so once you make it into tahini sauce, that's when you're going to have to refrigerate it, and it lasts for about a week in a nice, in the fridge. So it's nice to make a batch of maybe a tahini sauce that you find favorable from the cookbook or that you found online, and keep it in your fridge, because you can always pour it over roasted veggies, of course, over any protein that you're making. It makes a great topping on potatoes. I mean, the abilities, the ways that you can use it is truly limitless. So keep it in the fridge, but keep some on hand. Perfect. So now that this is nice and made, I'm going to prep the accompaniment to the chicken, which is some chickpeas and red onions. The recipe in the cookbook calls for about 3.5 to 4 pounds of chicken, but it's just my husband and I eating at home. And I don't know about you, but we're still not really having guests over. So I'm cutting the amount of chicken in about half, but I'm still keeping the amount of my spices for it whole. It's only 1 tablespoon of turmeric, actually the exact same measurements that we put into this sauce. 1 tablespoon of turmeric, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of coriander. We're gonna toss that onto the chickpeas and the red onion, and that is what is going to accompany my chicken once we get my chicken marinated. But first, let's toss that together. Actually, first, let's just get the chicken in. What you're going to do is you're going to take your chicken in either a 2-gallon bag or whatever size large bag that you have. You're not all from Philadelphia, and I get so much SHIT when I pull out this bag, but my husband is from Queens, and he's a Giants fan, and it's very embarrassing, but these are our Ziploc bags. And so what I'm going to do is put my chicken into this Ziploc bag and cover it with about 1 cup of the turmeric tahini sauce, and leave that marinating in the refrigerator for at least 30 minutes or overnight. And so what I shared with some people as we were getting ready this evening is it's already almost 8:30 p.m. here. And so I'm just going to be marinating my chicken and getting ready for, and letting it sit overnight for me to cook it tomorrow for dinner for me and my husband. So I have about 2.5 pounds of chicken ready, maybe a little bit less, maybe 2 pounds at this point, because I did get to cook off one small piece for us to show at the end here and for me to enjoy a nibble. But I'm going to get that chicken into my bag. I'm using kosher chicken, and so I don't salt my chicken beforehand. If you are not using kosher chicken or you prefer to salt it more, feel free. What I'm going to do now is sprinkle a little bit of black pepper on it. You can also, of course, sprinkle in some sea salt or your favorite salt to really, tenderize and get the chicken nice and flavorful. First, though, I'm just going to wash my hands briefly because I touched the raw poultry. So excuse me one moment.
I'm going to ask a question, Amy, while you're washing your hands, because we definitely have people who are not meat eaters, who are vegetarians or vegans, and I was wondering, what your suggestion is for this type of sauce, what works best in terms of protein.
One of my favorite things to do is to put this over baked tofu. You can make the entire recipe exactly the same, except simply bake tofu in the middle of the dish instead of chicken. I also absolutely love this over a full head of cauliflower. So while our cookbook does have another recipe for a full head of cauliflower, I love cauliflower, can eat it as a main almost any time of day or any day of the week. But this also goes great over cauliflower. It goes great over roasted potatoes. You'll find that this very flavorful, but also kind of even toned turmeric tahini sauce can go over almost anything. If for those of you that might be pescatarian and enjoy fish, I've also cooked this over some of my favorite fish dishes. It really is versatile for any types of dietary preferences. We have, I think in the cookbook, we counted them up. It's over 34 straight vegan recipes in the cookbook. So over a third, it might have even been higher than that, are pretty much based, are vegan. And all the recipes, including this chicken dish, can easily be made vegan or vegetarian, whatever is your preference. We have a recipe for a stuffed eggplant, which is vegetarian, that this can go great over, and also double stuffed sweet potatoes with some tomatoes in there and fresh kale. Really, tahini goes great over vegetables, so you can't go wrong putting this over your favorite type of vegetable. So what we're going to do is we're going to take about a cup of the tahini sauce and pour it right into the bag with our chicken. Also, don't forget to season your chicken, whether it's with salt or also pepper. I just looked down and remembered that I forgot to grind my pepper right over it. So I'm going to just drop a couple grounds in here now. And then you're going to close this bag up, give it a good mix over all the chicken, and release the air as best as possible. So I close it till about 1 inch open. Man, I hate these bags. Remind me, please, if any of you guys get in touch with me after, to just get new Ziploc bag. Squeeze all the air out, and we're just going to close it up and then rub the sauce all over the chicken. If you're cooking it today, great. As long as you can wait to let it marinate, the better. At least 30 minutes we recommend, but to be honest, I've done it with much less time, or overnight. And like I shared, I will be marinating mine overnight. So I'm going to get this into the oven, into my refrigerator, because it was sitting out for a couple minutes before we even got started. Perfect. Very full refrigerator, if you could see. I'm just going to put this to the side as we combine the chickpeas and the onions. Sorry. Which we're going to cook with the chicken to make this dish kind of whole. So I sliced up very thin, one medium-sized red onion, and I'm going to separate this in half. So half of my onion is going to go into a small side ramekin, and the other half I'm going to toss with the chickpeas, along with our spices, the turmeric, the coriander, and the cumin. So that just make sure it all fits, is about half. I'm gonna drop my bag of chickpeas. Again, if you're making the full 4 pounds or more, or serving lots of people, you can do this with up to 2 cans of chickpeas. So this can be very heavy and primarily based on the chickpeas and onions themselves, and complement the other, vegetables that you decide to pair with it, whether it's the cauliflower or baked tofu, which are all really nice. So feel free to play with the measurements. I mean, you really can't go wrong here. So I don't want anybody to be too strict on themselves in terms of how much of what. All the flavors come together really beautifully, and it is a very forgiving and easy recipe to accomplish whichever way you decide to take it. For the half of the onions that we're letting to sit on the side, we're gonna top that with the last tablespoon of lemon juice that we were saving. These are just gonna quickly pickle on the side and gonna be our fresh topping along with fresh cilantro or parsley to top the dish when you're ready to serve it. So I'm just gonna cover this up. We're gonna let it sit as long as the chicken is cooking. The oven will be set to, if you're cooking chicken with the bone in, 425, and it should take about 45 to 50 minutes for the chicken to cook through. You'll see the chickpeas get nice and pretty crispy, and the onions get super cooked, almost a little burnt, which is kind of how I prefer it. But we do keep these fresh, kind of bright citrus onions to top it as a really nice complement to everything that's been cooked together in your very hot 425 oven. For the other half of the onions, which we've combined with the chickpeas, we're gonna toss with the 1 tablespoon of turmeric, same exact ratio as we were using before, the teaspoon of cumin, and a teaspoon of coriander. These flavor profiles are very common in Middle Eastern cooking. Turmeric you'd also see familiar in Indian cuisine, and it's just an amazing flavor combination. Has a lot of really beautiful health benefits. Turmeric is really coveted for its many properties like antioxidant properties, anti-inflammatory properties. And we're simply going to toss these together and then drizzle it with about a tablespoon of olive oil to get these nice and coated. Just gonna mix up my onions and the chickpeas with my hands. I don't mind getting them a little dirty. And then cover it with the 1 tablespoon of olive oil. What you're gonna do when these are nicely coated is simply lay them on your baking sheet. I'm gonna grab my baking sheet that's behind me. And we're gonna very simply just push these to the edges of the baking sheet to make room for the chicken to cook right in along with it. So these all get tossed together, the chickpeas, the onions, and all the spices. And we simply lay it out on the baking sheet that you're going to be cooking the entire chicken in. Awesome.
Amy, a question has come up if your tahini is hechshered.
Yes, so our tahini is hechshered. It's hechshered with okay. It comes hechshered right out of Israel. So it's to all the most strict standards in Israel at this point. And it's usually not certified kosher for Passover, although for those of you who more traditionally eat kitniyot, it used to be considered a kitniyot, although I think this past year or maybe the year before, it brought fully over to be for sesame being kosher for Passover, but we don't typically, plan our production with the hechsher for kosher for Passover. But yes, we are hechshered kosher, absolutely.
Thank you.
It was a non-negotiable with my parents, and maintains for our family as well. Awesome. So hopefully you can see, but I just laid out the chickpeas and the onions. I'm going to simply push it to the sides of the baking sheet. But like I shared, my chicken is still marinating in the fridge. I'm actually not cooking this tonight, but what you're going to do is just simply push it to the edges, and you're going to lay your chicken right down in the middle here. Put it in the oven at 425 for about 40 minutes, or until your thermometer, if you use a meat thermometer, comes out to 160 degrees. And once it's done, I'm going to show you and take out my little bitty little serving from the toaster oven here to show you kind of how the skin of the chicken crisps up. The thick tahini stalks makes a beautiful coating on the chicken, or it would as well on your cauliflower or on your tofu, and just creates a really beautiful main dish for any evening that you're cooking for yourself, or hopefully in the near future, cooking for friends and family again. So that would be going with the main protein right into the oven, but I'm just gonna let it sit behind me. Again, turmeric is super messy, makes your hands very orange and yellow. So I'm just gonna wash my hands real quick before I grab our final plating of this. For those of you that also keep kosher, like my family, that's actually how this recipe came about. When we first started Zoom, our mother was always challenging us, how can we use tahini more, right? Because it wasn't traditional. I mean, she grew up in the Philadelphia area. She definitely did not grow up cooking with tahini very much. And when we started Zoom, she felt a lot of pressure. She was very excited to cook more with tahini. So I was home for a weekend or a week, or who knows how long at that point, and one Shabbat. A friend of hers had actually sent a recipe for a turmeric chicken, but it used Greek yogurt as the base of the marinade. And so she looked at it and she said, you know, well, obviously we can't make this because it's not kosher, but why don't we make a tahini version? So it's very easy to just combine tahini with water. I mean, back then I never measured anything. Measuring was really a testament to creating these solidified recipes for this cookbook. And so my mom and I made a very ad hoc tahini sauce, added in the other spices of the turmeric, and at this point now cumin and coriander as well. And it just made a delicious chicken dish. Now, it wasn't until I worked with Andrew, my co-author, that we really finalized those ratios of tahini to water and how much lemon juice and a tablespoon of turmeric, because my mom and I, you know, we never really cook very strictly with recipes themselves. But this recipe is definitely near and dear to my heart because it's one of the earliest ones that I developed with my mom, and really made me feel like tahini can be used for anything. So that is the origin of this recipe itself. So my chicken, I took one of the legs from my chicken that I bought at the butcher, and I just put it in my toaster oven to replicate what would happen if it was in my real oven. So I hope that you can see, anytime I get too close, you can kind of tell that the lighting's not perfect in my kitchen, but the skin really crisps up here. It makes a delicious crunch. It also has an amazing aroma. It's almost like a butter chicken that you might get at an Indian restaurant, which is something that I love because it feels creamy, but has no cream in it. The chickpeas are actually pretty hard, which it's very hard to get, you know, chickpeas crispy in my opinion. And you'll see that the onions are pretty much burnt. You can't even see them there because my background is so dark. But I love these burnt onions. They give a really nice crunch and also a really nice flavor. These are going to be topped with, and of course, plated. I got a plate. And then topped with my quick pickled onions and a little bit of whether it's fresh parsley or your favorite fresh herb. And it just comes together for like a beautiful dish. While I was just standing close to the screen, I saw somebody pop in a question about baking with tahini. So let me just get this plated, and then I'd love to share with you some of my favorite ways to bake with tahini, and some of the awesome ways that you can consider incorporating tahini into sweet recipes as well, not just savory. So this all comes together. Some of these nice lightly pickled onions are going to go right on top. They're super bright, very nice flavor, a really nice complement to the rest of the dish. And then your favorite herb, which I just realized I did not take my parsley out of the fridge, but maybe we can all just pretend together because that's my bad. But it's a delicious piece of chicken or whatever is your favorite protein. These very crispy chickpeas, which is one of my favorite parts. And then of course you can always take the extra sauce, right? We have an entire extra cup of sauce here ready to drizzle right over as much as you need it. Great. So like I shared, right, most people associate tahini with savory dishes. Just check on the time, whether that's hummus or this tahini sauce or a kind of extension of the tahini sauce with lots of spices. But one of our favorite ways to use tahini is actually to bake with it or to use it in sweet applications. It's really the impetus for us really deciding to consider to bring tahini to the American market was actually because of the joining of our family with Omri's family around carrot cake. Omri's mom, Rachela, makes a delicious carrot cake. And we asked her, how she made it. Carrot cake is actually also coincidentally our mom's favorite type of cake. So it's very shared, right? It was like a very nice coming together of the machatanim. And she shared with us that she substituted some of the olive oil or probably vegetable oil for tahini. And that really sparked light bulbs. I mean, not only did it give this really nice, nutty, sophisticated flavor to the carrot cake, but it's also so much healthier. I mean, tahini is coveted because of its health benefits from the sesame seeds. Sesame seeds are some of the best plant-based options for protein, calcium, iron, amazing vitamins and minerals like magnesium and phosphorus. And so we thought, wow, like if you can use tahini in a carrot cake, right? And you can use tahini in Israel, they also have tahini as a topping in frozen yogurt bars. Or, you can put it in on your yogurt or on your ice cream or in smoothies even. We can really introduce tahini and help teach people how it is so versatile and can be used for so many things. So if you consider tahini as a fat, you can sub it out for some oil in baked goods. I also sub it for peanut butter in a lot of recipes, like one of my favorite recipes from the cookbook, a tahini sugar cookie, very similar, almost a cross between a peanut butter cookie and a more traditional shortbread cookie, absolutely delicious. And tahini provides a nice, almost nutty flavor profile. And a little bit more sophisticated than most of the other nut butters that you might put into a baked good. And also all the health benefits like I like to share. So you can incorporate tahini. We have recipes for everything from cookies to smoothies, whether it's a coffee-based smoothie or a banana-based smoothie, to cakes, of course. We even have recipes for sweet tahini sauces, like a caramel tahini sauce, which is absolutely to die for. We incorporate chocolate tahini into marshmallows. I mean, the list really, really goes on. Actually, speaking of sweet and speaking of chocolate tahini, that is one of the ways that we have introduced tahini to the American market is by creating a chocolate spread. It's like our version of Nutella, except for the soul is tahini. So all the health benefits of sesame are in there. It's only 3 ingredients: tahini, powdered pure cane sugar, and cocoa powder. So there's no nuts, no dairy, no palm oil in there. And it's less than half the amount of sugar as Nutella. So we love it because it's a par product and also what I like to call a guiltless indulgence. So it's a delicious sweet spread. That's one of my favorite ways to use tahini. I think I saw a question pop up while I was sharing about the baked goods and sweets, if anybody wants to pass along that question.
We answered the questions about the baking, and then I was indicating to Nancy that there was a whole section in your cookbook about baking with tahini.
Oh, great. I thought is the
right, but now there's a question about what's the ratio for substituting tahini instead of oil in recipes. Is it 1-to-1?
So it's not exactly 1-to-1, and I'm really glad that you asked that, because even though we have specific, obviously, recipes for incorporating tahini into recipes instead of oil, I don't know the exact specific ratio. We actually work with a great university here in Philly, Drexel University. They have an awesome food lab where their culinary students get to work on real life questions and issues kind of like this for food companies. And we just presented them with this project, which is just a standard table of substituting tahini, excuse me, for many of the most common ingredients used in recipes that we're working to put tahini into. So olive oil is on that list, cream is on that list, peanut butter and other nut butters are on that list. So it's a great question. I don't have the specific answer for you. What I do a lot when I'm baking with tahini, for instance, in making a banana bread or maybe making some type of muffin, which I make all the time, having the little 2.5-year-old at home, is normally a banana bread calls for half a cup of vegetable oil. So what I do is I use a 1/4 cup of vegetable, or it calls for a cup of vegetable oil. Now my ratios are getting all off. But instead of half of the oil, what I do is I use a 1/4 of the oil amount in tahini and a 1/4 of that oil amount in applesauce. It allows me to cut down on maybe the rest of the sugar in the recipe, but B, it allows me to incorporate the tahini in instead of the vegetable oil. So that's a ratio that we use a lot. You can find recipes for the banana bread, both in the cookbook with those substitutes for the vegetable oil, and also on our website, soomfoods.com. So there's a lot of different ways that you can substitute the tahini for those major ingredients. And we're working on a specific table to address some of those more specific and more common ingredients that we're substituting tahini for.
There are a couple of other questions. Someone has to describe the taste of the Ceylon date syrup, whether or not it is sweet.
So it is sweet, although it's less sweet than honey, agave, or maple syrup. For those of you unfamiliar, Ceylon or date syrup is a very popular ingredient in Israel. It actually hails as a traditional sweetener from Iraq. I have a few friends from Iraq, and their family have shared with me they grew up eating tahini paired with Ceylon. It's like a date molasses, or also grape molasses, which was very popular in Iraq. And so it is sweet, but it's not as sweet as honey, agave, or maple syrup. In fact, it has a lower glycemic index than those sweeteners because of the benefit of the rest of the nutrients of the dates. It evens out the glycemic index of the date syrup. And so it almost has a more malty, like more on the molasses side flavor profile. It's a little bit more sophisticated and has more depth than just like a more flat honey or maple syrup. But it's still a delicious sweetener, and it's a lovely complement to tahini.
Another question is, what is the ratio for the chocolate sauce?
So we have a recipe for chocolate sauce in the cookbook. For the chocolate spread, it's about 66% tahini, I think about 20% powdered pure cane sugar, and the rest, if we're all doing the math together, is in a cocoa powder. So honestly, yes, you could make a chocolate tahini at home. One of the benefits of using, obviously, preferred manufacturing capabilities is it makes it really well emulsified and a really creamy and silky texture. But yes, it's just tahini, powdered sugar, and cocoa powder, about 2/3 of it being the tahini. The next ingredient is that powdered sugar. You can always do less powdered sugar if you want it less sweet, and then your favorite type of cocoa powder. And it really is like such a treat.
There's no other questions in the chat at this time. If anybody has a question they wish to ask, just unmute yourself and feel free to ask.
Yeah, please. Thank you so much for letting me share one of my favorite and close to my heart recipes, the turmeric tahini chicken. It's actually called Mom's Chicken in the cookbook. So that's a testament to my mom. And yeah, I think you'll find that whether you're putting it on chicken or putting it on your favorite hearty vegetables or even tofu or fish, that it's a really special sauce to have on hand. It goes great also as a topping if you're into rice bowls or quinoa bowls. You'll see that you'll be able to incorporate it across a lot of dishes that hopefully you like to cook at home.
Yeah, so I can tell,
I do have one quick question. When you take the chicken out of the marinade to put onto your cookie sheet, do you leave all of that marinade on there? Do you try and take some off of the chicken so it gets crispy? I mean, I wasn't sure.
I do leave all the marinade on there. I'll clean out the bag a little bit to get on it. You'll see that especially if you're using a bone-in chicken and cooking it for that solid 45 to 50 minutes, that it's gonna crisp up really nicely. And the more sauce that you have on there, the thicker that crispiness is gonna be. So don't skimp on the sauce from the marinade. But also keep in mind that you have quite a bit, half of the recipe of the turmeric tahini sauce itself on the side. So you can always put fresh sauce right on top when it comes out as well. But because it's bone in and is in the oven for quite some time, the tahini, the oil of the tahini really crisps up on the skin very, very nicely.
Somebody asked if the sauce would work for fried chicken.
Ooh, that's a great question. So we have a recipe in here for slightly non-traditional schnitzel. It takes a tahini vinaigrette instead of a more traditional, egg and flour based. Instead of using the egg as the wet, we take a tahini vinaigrette. So I'm not such an expert at frying chicken besides the schnitzel way, and my husband's actually the schnitzel expert in our house. And so we do have a schnitzel recipe in the cookbook, but honestly, looking at my little chicken drum here, it really looks like fried chicken. So I have a feeling, yes, I think that would be really fun to play with. It sounds delicious, in fact.
That's why we're here today. Between sundown and dusk, let us shine the lights, the darkness,
I'm not sure what this is.
Pool of reflection. Remember all we lost.
Okay, we'll ignore that question. I wanted to say thank you. I have, I think I still have 2 copies of the book in the office. If somebody is interested in those 2 copies, I know one has already been called, so I think I only have 1 left. Let me know and I will have it put aside for you. The book is available, Amy, where? On your website?
It's available on Amazon and wherever books are sold, whether your favorite independent retailer, which you can always find on booklist.com, and also on Amazon if you prefer to shop there. But we do sell signed copies from our website, zoomfoods.com.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everything. And I did make the chicken last Shabbos for my own family, and it was a big hit, just FYI.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that. For those of you maybe with little kids or grandkids, making these sauces in particular is something that I really enjoy doing with my son. He's 2.5 years old, and he tends to eat the things where he's helped to prepare the sauces. So, so it's my little trick where, if I'm trying to coerce him into eating some chicken, I say, and you made the sauce, and it gets him a little bit excited. So I love having the recipes be as family friendly as possible.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Does anybody else have any other questions for Amy before we sign off?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I've never asked a question. I printed it, I typed it, and then I didn't know how to send it. I just wondered if Amy is familiar with Molly Yeh. She has a cooking show on the Food Network called Girl Meets Farm. But she
underneath the big toe, the bunion. Okay, so is it hat? It's really and federal level. Yeah, to ensure ongoing.
I think it's somebody's television in the background. I'm not sure, Amy.
I think we're getting some background noise, but I love Molly Yeh, and maybe you're referring to one of her recipes for tahini that she's made. If you can ask the rest of your question again.
Yeah, I was just going to tell you that she uses tahini a lot. She's always pulling it out of her cupboard or refrigerator, and she uses it in savory things and also in baking. So I just thought that was fun, and I would hope that she would know about yours.
Thank you. She has shared about Zoom a few times in the past. She's also shared about another brand of tahini called Seed and Mill that's become popular over the last few years. And so she is also a great advocate for tahini. It's people like Molly Yeh, like Mike Solomonov, like many of these much more influential people, right, than me that have started incorporating tahini into more and more things that has helped us reach more people than we could reach just on our own. So I love that you know Molly Yeh. I love her cooking and her show Girl Meets Farm. She also has a cookbook that I highly recommend. She's one of my favorite cooks out there at this point.
Yeah, and she's from Glenview, which is just outside of Chicago here.
That's
Is,
funny.
and then she moved to farm country, right, with her husband.
Yes.
And has a very eclectic mixed family herself, Jewish, Chinese, and her husband's Norwegian. And it's just amazing the types of food that she creates.
Yeah, it's fun. It's
I
fun.
love her. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, people like that. And also just the excitement and interest in cooking in general, right? People like Molly Ye starting from blogs and now being on the the Food Network. It's been amazing to see how the industry has evolved and made space for so many great cooks these days.
Yeah, it's wonderful, wonderful.
I had a question about the name of your company. So it's so funny because now we all know Zoom, and so I was confused. But you're Zoom. So what does the name mean?
So Tsum means sesame in Hebrew. And so that's how we came up with the name Tsum Foods. But it's very funny you say that because our maiden name Z Zitelman, people have been calling it Zoom for years. Family members like my uncle who refuses to remember what it's really called, or friends. But actually early in the pandemic, when more people were learning about Zoom with a Z, we had one customer reach out and say, I was Googling for Zoom, but I came across Zoom and the product looked so nice that I ended up buying some. So it worked to our benefit at least one time.
All right, well, thank you. You were so inspiring, and I can't wait to make this for Shabbat. So thank you so much, and everyone have a great night. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. It means so much to be welcomed into your community and now brought to your Shabbat tables or any night of the week tables. I love connecting. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Amy. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure.
It's been lovely.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night. Have a good week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I know my internet connection is unstable. What can I do about it?